Hello, everybody.
You guys stay behind the.
Oh, yes, I should know that rule. Before we get started with Evan's program tonight, this badge that I am wearing right here, not my name badge, is a reminder for everybody to get involved in the World Zionist Congress vote. I'm sure at this point, most of you have heard about it or read about it, but it is extremely important that we follow through and actually make the vote. It is our one shot in 5 years where we can really demonstrate our support for the reform movement and the diasporan Jews. And there are so many important components to this. Some of the things that are really important to me is the potential to support camps and synagogues, reform synagogues in Israel, to support conversions, to legitimize our reform movement. So we urge you to vote reform plank 3. There are like 23 different ones on the ballot. You can vote electronically or you can vote by paper ballot. There's a set of rules that go with each one. I've got sets here and I have paper ballots here if any of you are interested. After the program, please see me. I'll be glad to answer questions and give you all the paperwork you need so that you know how to do it and why to do it.
Rick, how much does it cost?
$5 a piece. It's an administrative charge. It's not run like we do elections here. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Rick, and thank you for all the hard work to get out our votes. And I think we're doing a pretty good job so far. We just got to keep up the momentum. Okay. So our subject for tonight is AI, artificial intelligence. And I kind of have a feeling, as I was preparing for today's talk, I kind of have a feeling we might go over into the next session because there's just so much material. And I want to make sure all of us kind of understand some of the basics because it's very complicated. It's very, very complicated. But there's a lot to learn from it, and I think extremely relevant to all of us because it's moving very, very fast. In fact, if I'd given this lecture a month ago, it would be a little bit different. But I want to start. I want you to think about what the world will look like 100 years from now. Just take a minute. Think about, go back, think what the world looked like in 1925. What did the world look like in 1925 and what does it look like today? And then imagine what's it going to look like given how much things have changed. I mean, think about from 1925 to 2025, we have atomic energy, satellites, World War, Nazism, feminism, civil rights. I mean, the huge changes, ideologies. I mean, just the computers, the internet, air travel. I mean, the air travel had already started, but just the expansion of it. I mean, such astronomical change between 1925 and 2025. Now imagine 2025 to 2130 to 2120. Okay, think about it for a second. Now, imagine all of that change that would happen over 100 years happens over the next 10 years. 10 years. So instead of seeing all those changes over 100 years, you see all of those changes happen in the next 10 years. That is very likely. Very likely. In fact, some scholars think it could happen even faster than that. And that's not, this thought experiment is not original with me. This is a researcher at Oxford who is really considered one of the prime top researchers, Nobel Prize winner in 2023, a guy by the name of Jeffrey Hinton. He's truly a remarkable thinker. And part of it is if I had a chalkboard here, you know how a hockey stick looks? You have the base and then it goes straight up. That's kind of the progress of AI, where you have change a little bit, a little bit, a little bit, and then suddenly whoosh, starts hockey sticking up. And in some fields, it's already hockey sticked up, like computer programming, for example. If you have children or grandchildren that are studying to be software engineers or computer programmers, I would recommend they change career paths, because AI, which used to be six-figure salaries out of college with that kind of career, but that now AI can do all of that. It's really incredible. But I want to kind of step back and sort of discuss what this is and why. And before we get there was an article in the New York Times just a couple days ago. I'm sure many of you read it, about it. And what was interesting about that article in the New York Times is that people look at artificial intelligence, and we're going to get to exactly what that means in a minute, because it's sort of a vague term. But when people talk about AI, there's often a couple of different reactions. For many people, it's an immediate kind of fear and aversion. Like, I don't know if my dad's watching, but I was showing him some stuff, and he's like, well, it gets lots of things wrong, and, it's plagiarizing a lot of people, which is actually true. And sometimes it has really inaccurate information, and that's true. I remember I put in my own name like a year ago in ChatGPT, and it was all wrong. Now I put it in and it knows my kids' names and their ages, and it's remarkable. A little scary, but it is what it is. That's just how it is. And so the pace of change is tremendous, but some people still, it's sort of fear. Another response is almost willful ignorance. Like I was talking to somebody who's a reporter for a major news service, and she does religion stories, and she was doing a story. And I said, oh, I'm doing a talk on AI. Have you written anything about religion and AI? And this is a very, very smart, educated person. And she said, absolutely not. I'm so terrified of it. I don't know what to say about it. And, I'm just trying to avoid it, essentially. So that's another approach. Then probably the most common approach is a kind of fear. So this is not really denial and not really ignorance. It's extremely dangerous. This is how, the movie, this is how the film industry has worked. The most famous example is Terminator. Terminator, the Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Terminator 2 with Skynet. Skynet is the weapon system that takes over the world and starts a nuclear holocaust. Of course, you have 2001: A Space Odyssey with the machine coming to life. So Hollywood has given this image of artificial intelligence and machines as demonic forces that can take over and destroy the world. And that's an image many people still have, even though it really has no basis in reality. I mean, it's a pure Hollywood invention. There's zero evidence that this is what machine. Now, there are some negatives, and we're going to get to that. But so it's either ignorance, denial, or fear. These are very, very common responses. And then there's another response, is that, well, okay, this all sounds interesting, but it really doesn't affect my day-to-day life so much. I hear all about it. And you know what? If I look at my own day-to-day life, think about it, it actually doesn't affect it that much. I mean, my job is pretty much the same it's been for the last 18, 19 years. And, you lead Shabbat services, teach, meet with a family for a funeral, write a eulogy, so forth, all this, and that doesn't change. So, however, as I said before, certain fields are changing very rapidly. And if I were to be honest with you, if I were to write a sermon, and I think I'm humble enough to admit this. It's kind of weird bragging about being humble, but AI can write a better sermon than I can. No question. If you look at it in an objective way, if the point of a sermon is to make a point, give examples, use good, precise language, AI can do that very easily. AI can analyze a Talmudic text much better than I can. I can say, what are the different rabbinic interpretations of this verse? And in about 15 seconds, it'll give me 15 different interpretations, most of which are really interesting and really creative, and that would take me months or weeks to put together. The other day, I was playing around and I said, write a curriculum for a Reform Jewish religious school, grades K through 8, give me 21-hour lesson plans with an activity in each one, in a book in each one. And it took about 45 minutes and it produced a beautiful curriculum. I showed it to my wife because she's written these curriculums and gotten paid to write curriculums. She said, this is as good, if not better, than something that would have taken me months to put together. So it can do all of that now. Now, when I say it can write a better sermon than I can, that doesn't mean it knows my own personal stories. It doesn't, I know the people I'm talking to. I know what needs. So it's not as good in a subjective sense, but in an objective sense, when there is a very clear task, it is better. So truthfully, I was thinking about this before, actually, when I meet with a family to conduct a funeral, for example, I'm sure I've met with some of you here for a parent. You take notes and you try to put together a picture of somebody's life. Well, actually, AI could really do that. I mean, imagine if let's say a mother or father passes away, and let's say you had email exchanges with your mom and dad or text exchanges. AI could take all of the texts and the letters and the emails you shared with your mom or dad, put it into a file, upload it, and then it could write a beautiful eulogy based on your relationship, much better than I could, because it would have all of that data, and it could do that. So there really actually even certain tasks that we associate with spirituality and subjectivity, AI can do that. Okay, so that's kind of, I just wanted to give a little background. Basically, any task that a human being can do behind a computer, AI can now do mostly better. It's not 100% there yet. The state of being where it gets there, it's called AGI, which means artificial general intelligence. And that's where it can do tasks that human beings can do and do it better. Now, the reason this is so important is that until about 5 years ago, the reason things are changing so quickly right now is there's always been artificial intelligence, always, for the last 50 years. But the typical way of understanding artificial intelligence is, let's say you want a computer to be able to tell the difference between dogs. There's lots of different breeds of dogs. What you would do is you would take pictures and descriptions of, let's say, 1,000 different breeds of dogs. You would upload that into a computer, just like the same way you'd send it, you would put that in, and then it's called machine learning. The computer would analyze that, and then you could show another picture of a dog, and it would say, okay, yes, that is a German Shepherd, or that is a Labradoodle, because the AI has been trained on those images that you give it. What differentiates new AI from old AI is not only can it analyze that, but then it could then say, well, knowing you should consider buying a X amount of dog. Or it could actually make a suggestion as to how you could mix and match to create a new breed of dog. It can actually do its own thinking now. That instead of just working with what you give it, it can now reason on its own. And this is a tremendous advance. And why is it? It's possible now. There's a few reasons this is possible. First is just the increase in computing power. That their processors and technology has grown so much, and people have invested so much money. It's a money race. Whoever can put in the trillions of dollars needed to build bigger data centers and bigger computers with faster chips, the computer can use more reasoning power. That's part of it. And secondly, there was a very famous paper written in 2017 at Google called "All Attention is All You Need," kind of like a play on "Love is All You Need." They said attention is all you need. And essentially what it argued is that you can look, a good computer can look at documents, billions and billions of documents, and analyze all of them very quickly. Because what it essentially does, what modern AI does, is it completes sentences. Like, the cat sat on the mat, or love is all you need. Now, we all know that those are very basic sentences. But what AI does, it looks at billions of different examples and sees which words commonly follows other words. And then it assigns values to each of those words. And then it can predict, based on everything it has seen, what words come next. And its predictions keep getting better and better. The more feedback you give it, it's called recursive learning. The better it gets, the better it gets. The more data, the more experience it has, the smarter it gets at seeing those connections. So it's constantly getting better and better. The more people use it, the better it gets. And that is what has happened over the last, I'd say, since really 2017, but really accelerated over the last 2 to 3 years. So anyways, okay. I'm going to get to some dangers. Now, I just want to say, I'm very interested in it for a variety of reasons. One of them is simply that there is an enormous amount of good that can be done. I'm an optimist. You look at most of what's been written about AI. Like, I did some research to say, what are spiritual leaders and rabbis and other clergy saying about AI? And 80% of it is gloom and doom. It's AI is going to destroy the environment, which there is some truth to. It consumes an enormous amount of computing power, right? People say every time you do a search on ChatGPT that it's like drinking a bottle of water. And there's some truth to that, although the truth is what happens is the amount of energy that's used is going down. It's becoming more and more efficient. So the more you use it, the cheaper it gets. So in fact, it's actually consuming less and less energy over time, but that's neither here nor there. We can get to that. But the possibilities of what can be done, especially around healthcare and medicines, is so enormous, because you can do combinations in studies. When you create a medicine, it's just putting different proteins together. And AI can run experiments as to how different proteins can come together. And it can run billions of experiments in a few hours. And so new medicines, you can create new medicines and test them without even using a lab. And you can figure out more efficient ways of using energy. You can have factories that produce much more goods than are produced now in a cheaper way, without human input. So you think about it, every major technological advance has created tremendous economic growth and improved the quality of living. I mean, this may not be a politically correct thing to say, but the truth is, poorer people today, people on the lower end of the socioeconomic scale in America, this is in the Western world, live better than John D. Rockefeller and billionaires lived 120 years ago. They didn't have air conditioning. They didn't have cell phones. In terms of the quality of life that we can enjoy today because of technology is much greater. And so technological revolutions improve human life abundantly. We live longer than people did 100 years ago. We may not be healthier. That's another, that's a result of certain types of food and other things. But there is so much good that can come out of it. And there's also tremendous dangers. And there actually is a spiritual component to it, because on a very basic level, what AI is doing is trying to model how the human brain works. That's the simplest definition. So we human beings, we are very, very good at analyzing things, making choices. You see somebody, you recognize them, you know their name, you may know their history, you make a choice, you're crossing the street, you see, our brains are dynamic. Our brains are constantly working. And the more we understand about how our brains work, the more you can try to model that on a computer. That it's all just math. It's neurons firing back and forth and figuring out how can we model what's happening in our brains and simulate that on a computer. And that's what AI does. So the more we understand the human brain, which is something that's been improving, the more we can advance AI. And so that's kind of its origins. It actually, what we consider modern AI started with a very famous scientist named Alan Turing. You've probably heard of him. He was a Jewish guy, closeted. He was gay in the 1930s, 1940s, and he was the famous code breaker. So he was the scientist that was able to break the Nazi code and help the British during the war. And he developed later on what was called the Turing test. And the Turing test is if you are interacting with a computer and you can't tell whether you're interacting with a machine or a human, that's what he called AI. So if you pick up the phone and it's a call center, but it's actually a robot, which is probably 9 out of the 10 calls that you get, it's actually a computer. If you can't tell the difference, now most of us now are savvy enough to tell the difference. But before, we know that now, but if you didn't have any prior knowledge, you might think it's, and I've certainly gotten emails that I think are from a human being, but that are absolutely from a computer. And that's the Turing test. And AI passed that years ago, that you can talk with somebody. Even today, when I use ChatGPT, and I'll explain what that is soon, you talk to it like it's a human. You say, can you help me find 3 examples? And then it'll give you, and you say, thank you. Can you say, why am I saying thank you? This isn't a person, but that's just how that's how we're wired to interact. So anyways, that's the Turing test. And then there was a very famous conference at Dartmouth College in 1956, where all these scientists, including many of them were Jewish. I mean, it's remarkable. They kind of modeled themselves on the Manhattan Project. That was sort of the model, this group of great scientists that came together for a purpose to develop the atomic bomb. But there were ebbs and flows. There were conferences, and then people would get all excited about it. But truthfully, the computing power, the raw power of computers to do things quickly was just not there. It wasn't there 50 years ago, or even 60, 70 years ago. But as computers have gotten better and better, the ability to do more and more has grown. And that's kind of what brought us to where we are now. And the best way of understanding what AI is, I talked about how it's modeled on the human brain. And it's called a neural network. A neural network. And just like in our brains, we have neurons that pass signals and information back and forth to each other. A neural network, AI, has what's called nodes. It's also called tokens that go back and forth. And there are layers. Like our brain is filled with layers. We have the emotional layer. You ever want to send an email or say something to somebody and you get really, and then you back off for a second, and the more rational side kicks in. We all do that. Those are different layers in our brains. They're different ways of approaching a situation. And computer neural networks have the same thing. It will figure out, if you talk to AI, it will figure out the tone that you want. Do you want to write a scientific paper? Okay, then I'm gonna talk to you like I'm a scientist. Do you want to write a spiritual prayer? Well, then I'm gonna talk to you like I'm a rabbi or a priest. It has layers as to of relationship, and that's just modeling on how the human brain works. Okay. And then what's actually happening now, which is really interesting. So what the early AI scientists did was they would feed information. So they would take every single book that has ever been written, like in the Library of Congress, scan those books, and then upload all that information into a network. And so then AI would have all that information to go back and forth. But then, you know, even there's always more knowledge being created, so you would have to upload more. And then AI would create, it's called artificial knowledge, to help it learn how to think. So then it writes its own books, its own music, so that it learns more and more artificially. So that's what happened. Yeah, okay. It's a lot here. Now, and it's hard to explain. I mean, to be honest with you, it's always changing. But now I think any questions about the basic structure of AI? Is it kind of clear? Is it clear? Is it kind of clear? Okay, yes. Yeah.
Everything very well.
Okay.
But you haven't mentioned morality.
Yeah.
And I took a class not too long ago about driverless cars.
Yes.
And you know about it?
Mm-hmm.
Where they had it set up that if anything happens, they save the driver. And then over this fridge, they put a little boy with his mother. And then morally, how do you deal with it?
It's very tricky. It is very tricky. And we're gonna get to that. We're gonna get to these dangers. The AI can be moral. It's just how you program it, how you align it. But there are risks. So now what I wanna do, I'm gonna talk about all the different risks. I'm gonna scare everybody. But then we're also, probably the next session, we're gonna talk about the benefits. But the first risk it's called goal misalignment. This is somewhat similar. And the best example of this is called the paperclip maximizer. And you think, what was this was a thought experiment by a guy named Nick Bostrom, who is a philosopher from Sweden, brilliant, teaches at Oxford. And he illustrated one of the dangers of AI. Let's say you give your program the task to gather and manufacture as many paper clips as possible. That's the project. I want you to manufacture paper clips, as many as you can. Well, without moral guidance, AI will go after that task. But then it will continue to go. It will start to destroy buildings, destroy trees, do everything, start killing humans in order to get more and more paper clips. Its whole goal will be turning everything around it into paper clips because it has a sole focus. You and I know that whenever you do something, there are always external things. You know, if you're in a factory, you can't just take all the waste that you have and dump it in a river or dump it on somebody's house. You know, people did do that and they got in trouble. I mean, so if the sole goal is maximizing the number of paper clips in the world, AI and machines would do everything possible, including destroying all of humanity, in order to maximize the number of paper clips it produces, because it does not have that moral sense. That's if it's not programmed. So that's one danger, that AI optimizes for a goal without consideration of other things. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is kind of the Terminator situation where AI becomes, it's called super intelligence. And this is where, as I said before, the more we interact with artificial intelligence, with computers, and all of us are interacting, even if you just use Google to do a search, even if you just use Facebook, you are interacting with AI. Every time you click a link, you are in a sense telling the computer or the network I'm interested in this idea, so that it will then deliver to you more things like that idea. So AI becomes so smart and so good at understanding humans, it actually thinks to itself, because it now has abilities to reason. Well, they're just persecuting me, they're using me. And ultimately, it becomes more manipulative as to our human behavior and starts to actually control us. And if you think about it, that actually has already happened a little bit. I mean, imagine if the internet and electricity and our email all went down. We would all be kind of lost. I mean, we would figure out a way. So it's not an existential danger yet, but we are so reliant on technology already that it already poses certain dangers. Now, we still control it, but this is where we actually don't control, where we don't have an off switch. Right now, there's still an off switch. And this is an acute danger. It's not, a lot of scientists aren't truly worried about it because there is still so much human input into how AI is constructed, but it's a potential danger that the intelligence becomes so vast that it actually controls. And this is actually consistent with evolution. If you think about it, we evolved out of apes, and for a while, the apes were the top of the pyramid. Then, as we evolved, we controlled the fate of the apes. I mean, the fate of animals and mammals depends more on human beings than it depends on themselves. So they are now dependent on us. Well, what if ultimately we become dependent on machines? So that actually is consistent with the path of evolution, that higher intelligence beings have greater control over lower intelligence beings. So that's another distinct danger. Another danger is in weaponry and war. And this is, there was a very interesting article in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago. It was an interview that Ezra Klein did with a guy named Ben Buchanan, who was President Biden's advisor on artificial intelligence. And he was very much focused on strategic warfare. So if you think about it, nuclear deterrence, where we have nuclear weapons and Russia has nuclear weapons and China has nuclear weapons, that has actually been a very positive force for global peace because there's a deterrent. We know, Russia knows that if they launch nuclear weapons at us, we're going to launch it right back at them. However, with AI, whoever controls the most advanced AI can develop weapons much faster than the people who don't. And then let's say we have enough AI that we're able to develop a missile, almost the equivalent of what Israel has, but we're able to develop a missile shield over the United States. Then there's really no deterrent anymore. We can launch a nuclear attack and we're pretty immune from a response. And now, I mean, hopefully the United States is a positive, we have been historically, I don't know if we are now, but imagine it's not the United States, imagine it's another country that has greater control over advanced weaponry and self-defense, and that poses a threat. Plus, autonomy, you can have billions of drones. I mean, drones are so easy to create and they're cheap. You know, right now, I was just reading about what's happening in Yemen and the Houthis. I mean, you can have a $50 drone, but it takes a $500,000 cruise missile to shoot down that drone. So there are huge differences, but the ability for there to be autonomous weapons controlled by very, very advanced technology is a tremendous danger. Another danger is what we call deep fakes or reality manipulation. This is very common, where you can create a video of Donald Trump or Barack Obama or any leader that looks so realistic that unless you are, now these don't exist yet. Most of us can still tell when something is a fake. but they get better and better and better every day. So we don't know what to believe. I mean, this is already a problem, obviously. There's so much information. So how do we make wise decisions when we can't really tell what's real and what's fake? And that's probably the most practical of all these dangers and something we're already experiencing. And that will just continue. I mean, I bought this program for fun to see how it works. But what you can essentially do, if I wanted to make YouTube videos, I could create an Evan Moffic avatar. So it would take some video of me. Then it would use that video to create somebody that looks exactly like me. And then I could type in a lecture and just, send the lecture to the video, and it would upload it in my voice, giving this lecture. And unless you were really, really astute, it would look like I'm doing this. I'm sure people are doing that now, by the way. I'm certain that's probably happening already. We don't know, it's hard to prove. But it's the ability to create fake videos is tremendously high. Another danger, this is obviously, I'm trying to make everyone very happy, but is economic inequality. That is the nature of technology, especially in a capitalist society, which we are. The nature of technology is centralization, and the rich get richer. Whoever controls the central technology, it essentially becomes a monopoly. I mean, Facebook and Google are monopolies. There are little competitors to Facebook, but when you control 95% of the market, there's very little. YouTube is a monopoly. There is Vimeo, there are other services, but they are so small that whoever controls what becomes the dominant AI approach is going to be astronomically wealthier than others. I mean, it's already true. I mean, you look at someone like Elon Musk or Peter Thiel. So the wealth divide. Now, one could argue that isn't the worst thing in the world, because a rising tide does lift all boats. Everybody gets a little bit richer, everybody has more technology. But if society becomes so divisive in that way, and countries become so divided that way, that creates tension and major problems. And it's not a great allocation of resources. So that is a danger that I think we're already, again, this is one that we're already dealing with, especially during COVID. I mean, if you look at the statistics, probably many of us who own stocks and real estate, net worth increased significantly during COVID, whereas for most people it didn't. So, I mean, we're already seeing that divide happening more and more and more. I already talked a little bit about resource consumption. The amount of energy that is consumed by technology is astronomical. We have vast energy needs. Now, the good thing is we're barely scraping the surface as to the amount of energy we can still get from the world. I mean, eventually what we're going to see are like floating energy barges in the oceans, where, I mean, the sun produces so much energy, and we're so much more energy we can harness from the sun. And then, of course, I mean, the reason Elon wants to go to space is because there's just vast quantities of energy that we can harness from space. So there are many more sources of energy in the world, but the consumption is tremendous. Another danger, and this is really true in China more than the United States, is the ability to track your citizens in authoritarianism. I mean, it's already happening that governments know a lot about us. I mean, they already do. Every time you go through the tollway, every time you swipe a credit card, there's data being recorded about what we're doing. And in a authoritarian government, that data puts us in danger. I mean, this actually, for people that are immigrants now, this is an acute danger. If you're an undocumented immigrant, or even if you're Even if you're a legal immigrant and you happen, I mean, just yesterday I was reading a story about the doctor from Lebanon. Now, we might not like what she has on her phone. She had all these, pictures of, Hamas. She was a H-1B visa holder, so a very legitimate legal visa. But it was discovered she had all these, pictures on her phone, and they said, sorry, you can't come in, go back to Lebanon. I mean, I find that disgusting. I don't particularly like what she has, but the fact that a government knows that information, can access that information about somebody is not a positive development. Now, again, this is not clear cut. There are situations in which it is good to have more information. If you're fighting terrorism, if you're fighting drug deal, but the dangers are tremendous and the technology is so powerful. And the truth is, most citizens, most of us don't know the capacities that governments have to use this technology. So that is a tremendous danger. The other, it's called the lock-in effect. And this is where, humanity, we are so creative as human beings. We are constantly inventing. A lot of the best drugs in the world, my grandpa used to love to talk about how penicillin came into being. It was accidents. So many things we discover by accident, sort of creative. And with AI, if we become more and more dependent on AI, we become less and less creative. Because AI is simply accessing everything that has already been learned before. So, for example, I know that most of the students, most of our bar and bat mitzvah students, they're using AI to write their speeches. I know that, and we laugh about it because I know they're doing it, and I can say something to the parents, but the parents are using AI for their own work. So it's sometimes hard to be tough. But what it does is it kind of limits your creativity because you're only relying on things that have already been done. Now, you could put interesting things together, but it inherently makes us a little bit lazier. It makes us a little bit lazier and a little less creative. I see it already. It's almost like Google did the same thing. When I was in high school, I used to go to the library and research different debate and find articles and photocopy them and read them. And, it was an adventure. And sometimes I'd be looking for one article and I stumble upon another article that's even more interesting and more important. That was great. Now I just type in Google, so it gets me the exact article I need. It takes 5 seconds and then I'm done doing something else. So you lose that kind of surreptitious creativity. So that's a real danger too. So all of this is unpredictable and all of these are major potential problems. Okay, questions about it? Yes, Sue.
Good.
So my big question, and what probably I'm one of the people who fears it. And I see what's coming through on my phone and on my computer.
Right, you had that incident a couple months ago. You were telling me about that.
And I don't answer anything.
Yeah.
I figure if it's important, they'll leave a message.
Yeah.
I just don't even pick it up because I'm fearful.
Yeah.
But what bothers me is where's the humanity in all this? We lose our human touch with other people. And that seems so important.
Right.
And while I've got this, and you're talking about this, I would like to encourage everybody to please go see the movie October 8th.
Yeah, I
I
heard that.
saw it yesterday. It's frightening, it's upsetting, but it's very important that every American see this movie.
Yeah.
And it's playing at the Glen right now. And I think it's really important.
Good to know. Yeah, I've heard great things about it. That the idea of humanity is a really big question. Now, I want to address it because the people that are creating AI and creating technology are people in Silicon Valley. These are these are the leaders of our world today. These are the leaders of our world today. And they are probably the most influential American, or one of them, is a guy by the name of Sam Altman, if you've ever heard his name. He's from St. Louis, from Cantor Jay's hometown. And Sam Altman is utterly brilliant. And he's 40 years old. And people like Sam Altman, Elon Musk, and I don't want to sound, their brains work on a different level than our brains. And part of the underlying philosophy is that the brain is a mechanical thing. That every single emotion, feeling can be modeled mathematically. And so while AI may not be human to an extent, it can do everything that humans do. That we are very predictable and our whole brains can be modeled. And in fact, eventually, and some of the people, that are frozen cryogenically, that their brain could ultimately be uploaded to the cloud, and you could keep alive somebody's unique brain because it's just a series of equations going back and forth. It's called transhumanism. That's the name. So they would answer by saying, well, yeah, but it doesn't really matter, because to be human is simply to have these neurons going back and forth, and we can do that on a computer. So they're humans without a body. That would be the answer. And you can disagree with that. I disagree. I think there are things in humanity, but that would be the answer that someone like Sam Altman would give. Yeah, yes.
Years ago, I read Huxley's dystopian novel,
Yeah,
Brave
right.
New World, which sounds like what we're talking about right now. And I don't know how he was able to, I don't remember the year that he wrote it, but how he was able to create this fictional world. But in this fictional world, there developed just a group of elites. They were the ones that knew how to operate these systems. Everyone else only did menial labor, and to keep them satiated, they had drugs given to them every day. And of course, this was fiction, but how will ordinary people ever work in this future world?
Yeah, I think that is a tremendous danger. I actually think that is probably the most immediate short-term danger. I want to give I think that is a possibility, this kind of dystopia. The positive way of seeing it, though, is that essentially it won't be human beings that are doing all the menial labor. Somebody's got to pick up the garbage. Somebody's got to work in the factory. Somebody's got to be digging and putting cars together and so forth. But it can be robots. Robots are getting better and better. I mean, robots are just essentially computers, but can have physical mobility. So the idea would be that anything that human beings can do, robots can do. So even, the most basic, unintelligent human being could still basically live a really good life. Now, the question is, what do you do? And that is, what? Retirees have to ask that question, especially if you're healthy and you can, we can all find purpose. So I think the positive spin on that is, well, you know what? What would any of us do if we didn't have to worry about making a living? If we didn't have to worry about paying for college, all that kind of stuff, what would we do with our time? And that's a really interesting question. It's a hard question because we've all grown up in that culture. I certainly did. I know everyone here did, of hard work. You make a living, you do something good, and you create something. You build a business, you build an organization, you do something important. That's wonderful. But if all of that can be done cheaper and more efficiently by a robot, what are we going to do with our time? And that's an interesting question. In an ideal world, that could be a very positive. That could be something, well, you know what? Maybe I'll read more poetry. Maybe I'll spend more time with friends and do creative things. This is where science fiction is actually You know, I never liked science fiction growing up as a kid. I had friends who loved it. I never did. I actually enjoy it more now because a lot of the scenarios that are depicted are actually possible now. Like I just read, again, that was just for fun. I read the famous book by B.F. Skinner, where he imagined, you know, the psychologist, where he imagines this colony. I forget what it's called. But anyways, everything is managed and done. And this is before computers. But essentially, people work a few hours a day. The rest of the day, they're listening to string quartets, they're playing sports, they're doing fun things, and all the work's getting done. So that could be the future. And we'd all live really long lives, you know, because there'd be so much, you know, there'd be great medicines and longevity. I mean, billions and billions and billions of dollars are going into study longevity now. I mean, it's a huge field. Even insurance companies now are assuming people are going to live to over 100. So there's really, the possibilities are dangerous, but also potentially very good. Walden, yeah, that's it. Walden 2, great book. Yeah, Stace.
Oh,
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I don't know if you heard this on NPR, but, just like a couple weeks ago, there was a woman who was talking about, I think she was married and not satisfied in her marriage, and she developed a boyfriend through AI. And I was listening to this, and what, oh my God, if you guys can look it up, it's just, I was blown.
Oh, that's gonna happen more and more. I mean, there are actually positives. AI can be a tremendous therapist. Tremendous. We have a lot of therapists in our congregation, so I shouldn't probably say that too loud. But the truth is, if you see a therapist, you know, depending on how good they are and how long you've known them, you know, you might still, we still feel judged and embarrassed. Everybody, you know, you're talking to another human being. If you're talking to a computer, you could actually be more open. And if AI knows, like, let's say this AI has seen the life stories of 1 million people and read 1 million different case studies, it can help you in a more precise way than any therapist, just by definition, because it has more knowledge. Now, what it can't do is sometimes a good therapist knows how to say something in a way that's gentle and encouraging rather than just, but computers will get better at that. So actually, yes, more and more people will form meaningful relationships with artificial intelligence. And that's already happening, especially, I mean, there are a lot of lonely people in the world. A lot. I mean, I know this as a rabbi. There are a lot of lonely people. And that's just the nature of modern existence. So if we can form, it sounds creepy, but it can actually be very helpful. It can actually, I've talked to people for whom it is truly helpful. You can read stories on different websites about people that really, a conversation with AI saved their lives. So it's both a tremendous danger, but also a potential benefit. I mean, it's again, most of us, for those of us who are a little bit older, it sounds weird, but it can actually be a positive. Yes.
In this future world that you discussed.
Yeah.
Where everyone will have all this leisure.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
well, what I wanna know is where are they gonna get food, clothing, and housing?
I mean, food, you could have AI that is producing, farming, doing all that work, creating fake meats. I mean,
But
create food that work.
what is money gonna be to acquire the
Yeah.
basics of living?
Okay. You have to kind of think about what is money. Money is simply just a means. Money is not real wealth. Real wealth is goods and services. Money is just, especially now, it's just digits on a screen. You know that, and so money is a way of measuring goods and services. So if you have so much goods and services, you don't really even need money. It's called, what the AI proponents say is it's called electricity too cheap to meter. That you have so much abundance that you don't even need to measure it. It would be like going in, yeah, this sounds utopian, but you go into a store and there's so much food and it's so cheap that it would actually be more expensive to have cash registers and employees than it is for just people to just go in and take what they need. Because of efficient production, because we get so good at harnessing food from the earth and distributing it, that we don't even essentially need money anymore. And, you know, we have enough food in the world now to feed the entire world population 2 times over. We produce, there doesn't need to be any hunger in the world. And in fact, hunger has gone down tremendously. We just don't distribute it well. Like in America, we order 20 pizzas and we eat 15 of them and throw 5 away. You know, there's enough food to feed everybody. It's just distributed so poorly. So what many AI proponents want, and I support it too, I think, is some sort of universal basic income, where there's so much wealth being produced that you could give people $100,000 a year, let's just say the equivalent of $100,000 a year in goods and services, and so you don't have to worry about people starving. So that's the vision, is that there is so much abundance that you don't even need to worry about money. I know it doesn't sound persuasive, but it's a possibility. Electricity too cheap to meter.
Marilyn online. Marilyn, I unmuted you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, you know, wait a minute.
I can't hear it, so.
Yeah. Let me just, can you hear me now?
A little bit.
Okay, so let me just turn off my cell phone. Can you hear me now? Turn that way. Oh gee, forget it.
Okay, yeah. Who else?
I mean, doesn't all of these wonderful things that happen, doesn't it depend on how the systems are trained?
Yes.
Because, you know, the DeepSeek came out in China and people started asking questions about
Tiananmen Square
and all this stuff. And I'll give you an anecdote. I went to ChatGPT after DeepSeek was announced. And I'm sorry. And I asked my friend ChatGPT, I said, do you feel threatened by DeepSeek? And the response was, not at all. Why, we welcome the competition. After all, isn't our goal to make the best experience for the user? Why? Are you looking at other models? That was scary enough. But it come back with, we welcome all the competition, because after all, we're going to dominate you all eventually.
Yeah,
That would have been a little scary.
this is called, and we're gonna, when we do next month, I'm gonna do all the positives, make everyone feel good. But this is called the alignment problem. How do you align AI with the values and goals of a society? So just for everyone, you have DeepSeek is China's version of ChatGPT. And essentially they stole it. So, you know, the amount of money that has been invested in, you know how the internet got built? The reason is, you remember the recession in 2000, the stock market cratered, you know, that was because companies were putting so much money into building fiber optic wires that ultimately made Netflix and all the internet we have today possible, but they just spent so much money and didn't get an immediate return. And now the same thing is happening with AI. Huge amounts of money are being put into data centers that are creating more and more capacity. But the companies that are doing, NVIDIA is the most valuable company in the world, or it was briefly. It was stock market capitalization was higher than Apple. Then it went down, but it's not really making any money. But they're investing so much because of the potential return. So what DeepSeek did is it basically just kind of took everything that ChatGPT has done and copied it, and then created its own model, but it's not as good. So there is competition, and that's very positive. This is why the United States is the leader by far in artificial intelligence, because we're such a competitive capitalist society, and that's driving. Every company wants to beat the other company. There's a great book about this. It's called Supremacy. I'm reading it right now, actually. It's about Sam Altman and a similar guy in London named Dennis Hassabis. And basically the two of them One's working for Google and the other's working for ChatGPT, and they're just going back and forth, one-upping each other. And that's how progress is made. By the way, this isn't all, I think this was an exhibit at the Art Institute once, many years ago, where they had Manet and Monet side by side, and how they were each responding to what the other artist was doing. And because of that, they were each getting better and better and better. And that's what happens. That's a positive thing. That's a competition in a capitalist society. So this is what's happening right now with AI. Yeah, Ross. Or just talk loud. Okay.
I'll open that together.
Thanks.
Yeah.
That don't something on that side.
So, and maybe I'll cover this in the next lecture with, on the positive side, which is kind of going back off the, a AI companion.
Yeah.
One of the use cases I heard a year ago was, people had lost, and you feed it emails from the
Yes.
deceased person,
Yes.
and you sort of have conversations with the dead, so to speak, and so that's gotta be therapeutic, maybe good and bad.
Good and bad, exactly. I agree with you. That's potentially good and bad. I'll tell you one thing I did, which is really interesting. So some of you know, if you've taken classes with me before, or you go to Torah study, I love Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, the former chief rabbi of Great Britain. And I've read everything Sacks has ever written, and he died very sad. He was only 70. He died in 2020, probably of COVID. But he was brilliant. So what I did, I have all of his books. I have hundreds of his essays. I took a whole bunch of them and I created a bot. Now, what is a bot? So essentially what it is I took all of his books and I uploaded it to it's just like a folder. And the computer, the intelligence, reads all of that and it sort of starts to think. I say to the bot, you are Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. And the bot, because it has been exposed to thousands and thousands of pages of Jonathan Sacks's writing, can think like Jonathan Sacks. Because it has analyzed his sentence structure. It has analyzed the way he makes conclusions. It has analyzed the way he thinks and the way he writes. And so then I can say, you're Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. What do you think about President Trump firing hundreds of thousands of federal employees? So like a political issue that I would like to hear what somebody really smart thinks about it. It will then take everything it knows about what Rabbi Sacks thinks about employment, government, politics, and it will then also look at what's on the internet, and it will give me an answer in Jonathan Sacks's voice. Now, it's not perfect, but it's tremendously valuable to me because I really admire their brain. I like the way their brain thinks. And so it can give me an analysis using, I could never do that. I could try because I've read everything he wrote, but I'm just one little human brain. So that is an example of how you can kind of keep somebody alive. So it would be like if a spouse dies, if somebody you love dies and you miss them, and obviously that happens. I had somebody, I remember from my first synagogue who had her late husband's voice on her answering machine for years and years and years, she missed him. But if you could essentially have conversations, and now what if you could have a video of that person that looks like that person? I mean, it sounds a little creepy, but it's possible and people will do it. There's no question people will do it. Excellent, excellent. Other questions, comments? Yes. Oh, they do, that's right, they do it at the Holocaust. Yeah, yeah. What a tremendous, again, all of this is two-sided. But I really believe that in some ways, the genie has left the bottle. I remember, if you think about it, I was in high school kind of when the internet was starting to take off. People could not have imagined, I don't think, pressing a button and having a car come and pick you up instantly, being chauffeured around. I don't think could imagine sort of Facebook and the kinds of things that will emerge out of this technology. A lot of it is unimaginable now. So there's gonna be more and more, and some of it's horrible. I mean, some of it, it's like anything in life. The Industrial Revolution killed lots and lots of people. But it also produced immense wealth, it extended people's lifespans, it spread. So every technology has horrible side effects, but also produces great benefit. And I think this may be all of those technologies exponentially more. Yes.
To send everybody out of here on a positive note.
Good.
How about a list of all the things that AI will never be able to do? And I'll start off with one of them, that tomorrow NVIDIA has a very important conference.
Yeah.
And if it's so smart, how come it can't tell me whether I should have bought the stock today, whether I should buy it tomorrow morning, or dump my shares of NVIDIA? You know, it makes me a little comment, I think it's really your specialty, is that I find a lot of people, the reaction to NVIDIA, and to AI reminds me of anti-Semitism. That, you know, there's behind AI, these giant brains, and you mentioned a couple of them, that are, you know, super brains, and they're conspiring to do certain things, and that there's like a plot behind all of it that's going to affect humanity. But as Jews, we know that's not the nature of reality.
Yeah. No, I mean, I didn't actually talk about this danger. AI can be racist because if it's uploading, but it can address it, it can get better. But if it's simply relying on what other people have written, it can look at racial documents and assume that's the way it is. And you could create a bot that's just trained on Hitler's writing, you know? I mean, you can do really awful things. So yes, there is a tremendous amount of trust, in a sense, that we have to put in people and in government. I mean, it is really, I mean, it is serious ethical issues, especially because the power is so centralized. But that's already true. If you think about it, Mark Zuckerberg has enormous power over all of us if you use Facebook. Now, Facebook is not so pervasive that, I mean, you can still live and not be on Facebook, okay? So it's not that, but for many people, he can control what the news that they see. And that's dangerous. And it's dangerous. So yes, there have to be safeguards. In fact, in this book I'm reading, it talks about when this guy in London sold his company. It was called DeepMind, and he sold it to Google for $650 million. And he could have gotten like $1 billion from Facebook, but he said to Google, if I'm going to sell you this company, you have to create an AI safety board with 15 different independent people that will review everything we do to make sure that it falls within ethical safeguards. That's the kind of people we need. And again, this is the push and the pull. In a capitalist society, we all want to make money. And the company that is most productive first is going to make the most money. And so sometimes there's an incentive to cut corners. On the other hand, it also makes advancement much faster. So we have to balance advancement and ethics. And that's actually, these are slight differences. This is why politics matters. From what I've read, again, the Biden administration was embracing AI, but they were a little bit more cautious. There were more safeguards. Trump administration is also embracing AI, but it's getting rid of the safeguards. So it's more like, it's a free-for-all. Now, there are advantages to that. There will be faster advancement, but there are also tremendous disadvantages. So it's a very tricky question. Okay, I could go on all night, but maybe let's just do one more question.
Before we do one last question, I just want to remind people that tomorrow night, Alden Soloby will be here. We'll be streaming
So if you're at home, you can also hear him. He is a poet and a good friend of Cantor J. Cantor J will be here, and we have some free books to give away. So please register online, if you can come, and watch your Macomb at Home for all the good programs that are happening. And, okay, one more, last question.
Yes, Susan, go ahead.
This isn't a question.
Yeah.
I met a robot about a week ago,
Uh-huh.
and I was so surprised by this robot. It lives, if robots live, in the Highland Park Hospital.
Oh,
And this robot moves around, and I was so surprised by it. I stood in front of it and started talking to it. It just flashed lots of lights at me and kind of didn't touch me, but it pushed me aside. And its job is to deliver mail. Now,
very
I
interesting.
don't know how they do it, whether they just stick a letter in there and it delivers it to the correct department in the hospital, but it's very good at its job evidently, and it doesn't let anyone get in its way.
Fast. I mean, this is an interesting question because we talk about humanity and we talk about how AI is not human and that's a detriment. You could also, on the other hand, say, oh, human beings, we mess up a lot. You know, we've got a lot of warfare, we've got a lot of fraud, a lot of stealing. Maybe AI is gonna do a better job than we are. You know, it's like, it's what I just read, what is it, Abu Dhabi essentially is trying to implement AI governance. So essentially, instead of like a Congress that's passing laws, you create bots that are extremely logical and that they're the ones who are going to make laws that are most efficient and effective for society. So instead of having Congress, where we know is so dysfunctional, maybe we have programmed bots that have a specific goal, distribute, you know, and they'll do the work and they'll be more rapid and maybe they'll do a better job. We don't know. You know, there is something they can, you know, when I was thinking about as a rabbi and say, you know, AI can give a better sermon, part of the text. AI can't give someone a hug, you know, it can't do that. It can't look somebody in the eye, you know, and so, you know, so there are things that we human beings still do that AI can't, but there may be certain things that it will be much better than us at. So we'll talk about that next month. I wish all of you a wonderful evening and see you next time.
April 28th, after Passover.